Welcome. I'm delighted that you can join us for this second annual Black History Month Women's Celebration. This year's theme, Women Making History. Seems an obvious choice, right? This year we saw the first woman of color sworn in as a vice president in our 200-plus year democracy. This year began coming out from the smoke of turbulence of a 2020 like no other before. History is not just what happens, it's what we take the time to record. Today, we officially document the great work of 5 phenomenal, engaged, and caring women who never faltered and, in fact, burst forth with energy and clarity in the midst of a devastating pandemic, in the worst economic crisis since the Great Depression, and in spite of egregious, heart-wrenching incidents of blatant and violent racism. They didn't stop. They stood. They stood and they brought Black joy and excellence in the face of divisive politics and bigotry. They stood for equity and social justice. These are real sheroes, women who choose not to leave a legacy, but to live one. And they join us today to once again speak with candor and courage about their sense of purpose and how they've overcome the odds to achieve positive change. Empowered women empower other women. As the first woman president and CEO of the Columbus Urban League, I am because of them. And I hope I've held the door open for other sisters to get to the table, just as my friend Rosalind Brewer has done throughout her career and can now do from an ever more advantageous position. She just became the first female Black CEO of a Fortune 500 company, Walgreens. So my hope for today, and the reason why your Columbus Urban League put this event together, is that when each of you close your Zoom window this afternoon, you feel more committed, more emboldened to bring a strong and empowering voice to every conversation and always write her story. So now let's turn to our moderator, Sierra Lucas, who is here because of our wonderful sponsor and partner, WSYX TV.
Thank you so much, Stephanie. So happy to be here today. My station volunteered to be part of the Columbus Urban League's Black History Month celebration. We've been airing stories throughout the month that go deeper into issues like racial inequities in housing, and we've been featuring those sheroes that we're honoring today throughout the rest of this month. You might have seen some of those stories airing during the pre-show today. Now, historically, the achievements and work of Black people just never seem to earn the same ink or same airtime as others. So part of what WSYX TV hopes to do with our partnership with the Columbus Urban League is to make sure the glare of the spotlight warms everyone's skin, regardless of its color. We also love to call out dynamic businesses owned by Black female entrepreneurs, and that's what we'll be doing today throughout the program as well. Let's start with Kadada Bethel from Top of Mind Tees. She is the mastermind behind today's t-shirts that some of us are wearing today. Instead of dress for success, Kadada crafts designs that dress and express. And speaking of expression, let's hear from a woman who is known for her elegance and eloquence. That's our first honoree, Donna James.
Donna James has always had a gift for helping others.
From my high school days would say, Donna, you're always the person we would go to for advice and counsel. I'm a problem solver.
She now uses that advice and counsel in her own business. She's the managing director of Lardon and Associates, a company which helps shape leaders. And good leaders, she says, are needed, especially during a time when she says the country is dealing with 2 crises, racism and the pandemic.
It certainly has ramped up or amped up the focus on diversity, equity, and inclusion, and also ramped up the focus on health and safety of employees, and also the emphasis on leaders and how they lead in a moment like this.
James says many companies are interested in change, making diversity a reality.
The level of awareness of what they know and what they don't know for a lot of companies is up, And you still have leaders who need to put a lot more emphasis on awareness so that their words can be more than words and just put them into action.
Unfortunately, Donna could not be with us today, but please join me in watching an intimate interview I conducted earlier this week exclusively for today's event. Let's hear more from this highly successful executive who rose to the top of nationwide strategic investments before retiring to launch her own firm. And as we do, remember that Donna has served and still serves on many corporate boards, but none matters more to her than two nonprofits with a focus on teenage mothers and babies and developing Black leadership. Donna, thanks so much for being here today. We honor you and all of your accomplishments as part of this event with Columbus Urban League. First of all, you really represent such a pillar of leadership, serving as the managing director for Lardon and Associates. And to start us off, I'd love to hear, what would you say has been your secret to really thriving in such competitive environments?
Wow, it has to be my passion for people. Human dignity, and probably a more succinct way to say it is I love helping people get to their best next, people and businesses.
Now, we also want to highlight your community involvement, not just your corporate work. You have a passion for helping teenage mothers and healthy families, your role as part of the Center for Healthy Families. Can you talk to us about where that passion came from?
Well, that's interesting. My passion for the Center for Healthy Families really comes out of just a natural tendency I have to help people solve problems. And two social workers approached me over 15 years ago and shared with me a problem in our community around pregnant and parenting teens and mentorship. And I took it to heart and pulled together a team led by my co-founder, Tashia Safford, to really solve the problem of how do we help these young people who are in crisis get to their best next.
And what would you say are really the biggest challenges around birthing and raising healthy babies?
Well, it's interesting. It does seem to cause one to think about the nexus of it, birthing and having babies, but it really is all about stepping back and looking at social and economic self-sufficiency, helping young people see beyond their front door about the possibilities in life and how to align with those, and also how to really combat social and economic determinants of health and welfare that young people, and especially African Americans, deal with every day.
Those are two challenges that really are consistently challenging and hard work to do. What would you say is working and what you think you need to do more of?
Well, I think what's working right now is that there are organizations in place like the Center for Healthy Families, like the Columbus Urban League, who are every day on the front lines trying to help. And they create this bridge between people and organizations who want to help and people on the front lines who can actually touch individuals who are in need of help. I think that's working. I think what we need more of is a systemic approach because the problems did not occur overnight and they're not going to be remedied overnight. So housing, healthcare and access to quality healthcare, transportation, food scarcity, underemployed and not just unemployed are the problems that systemically have to be addressed.
As I'm sure you've seen, tackling issues like that really does take a village. You can't do it alone. Who would you say are some of your best mentors?
Oh, my best mentors. Boy, you put me on the spot because I'll leave people off in this case. But I would say my best mentors have been individuals like Les Wright. I'll even put my husband in that category. Larry James. I'll even put a former CEO in that category, McPherson. And I'll put a colleague of mine, Gail King, in that category as well. And I have missed so many. I have a favorite quote that I really like, and it's about life. And it's, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And so figuring out those people you can go far with and go together with is really the key. And so a lot of my mentors have been people that I collect like a village, no one person.
So also as part of the work that you do, you've also recently really turned up the volume in talking to major companies and foundations about systemic racism. Do you feel like your words are really getting through to them? And, you know, what is the response?
Well, when you start to hear your words coming from individuals and organizations as words that they've embraced, but more importantly, as action, and I think that's what's starting to happen. Yes, as a result of the social injustice and the protests, you've heard more from leaders in the corporate space. Now it's turning those words into action. Now it's turning those words from just writing a paycheck to actually making changes in their organizations at the macro level and at the micro level, middle management as well as top management. For all employees. And I am starting to see greater awareness around that and commitment to not just have words, but actually take concrete steps to change things.
I want to thank you for your time today and congratulate you on this honor. We so appreciate you sharing all of your wisdom and all the work that you do for the community.
Well, it's a blessing, and I appreciate being able to while I can. So my gratitude to the Columbus Urban League for this honor.
Thank you so much. So knowing Donna's passionate commitment to ensuring every child reaches her full potential, let's take a moment to feature yet another Black woman-owned business that reflects that same spirit. That's Young Scholars Enrichment Center, and owner/educator Kaya Edwards is truly turning today's learners into tomorrow's leaders. YSEC serves infants to school-age students and helps all of their children discover their own individual strengths and their unique talents in a safe, nurturing, and stimulating environment. We'll turn now to our second honoree, a woman who's devoted her life to public service and advancing racial equity and social justice. That's Congresswoman Joyce Beatty. Congresswoman Beatty is actually joined with us today. She is on the call, so we want to say hello and thank her so much for being able to be here.
She calls it an honor of a lifetime. Congresswoman Joyce Beatty now sits as chair of the Congressional Black Caucus. As one of the highest-ranking African-American women in politics, she's passionate about pushing women to advance not only in politics, but the workplace.
I think the thing for women I'd like to say is we belong here. And that's the first step of feeling about yourself that you belong. And it is our time to belong. And here's the good thing. Having Kamala Harris as Vice President of the United States makes it real.
Beatty says women shouldn't doubt themselves.
Unless we advance America, whether that is in the corporate America, whether that's in the social justice or the injustices that we are fighting against. So I think we have to do a thing that I call going from agony to action.
The Congresswoman knows action, taking part in the downtown Columbus protest over the summer, where she was pepper sprayed for pushing an end to systemic racism. Beatty tells me there's no time like the present to get involved.
It's our time to make a difference. Let's just go out there and get it because we have women power.
A five-term member in the Ohio House of Representatives, Joyce was the first female Democratic House leader in Ohio's history. As Congresswoman for the 3rd House District since 2013, she's fought long and hard to reinvest in Black communities, stop human trafficking, promote early education, and stand tall for the rights of women and minorities. Her power and her impact just continues to grow, especially as the leader of the Congressional Black Caucus. She's here in spirit, but she's also here on Zoom. We have her joined with us today, but Joyce has a private message to us from earlier this week.
when I think about the pandemic, and it's a three-headed pandemic. It is not only healthcare, but it's what it's done to our economy and certainly all of our social justice issues. Just think about it. We have gone from an inauguration, an insurrection, to an impeachment. And I've been engaged right up front with all of those things because I consider it a responsibility, a duty to serve, that I stand up and be a voice for the people that I represent. Matter of fact, for this nation, I take great honor and pride in fighting and advocating for those who are voiceless and being someone who believes I need to be out front because so many of our constituents, they stand up for justice every day. When essential workers go in to work during this pandemic, they're fighting to save lives and their lives as well. I believe that I have a responsibility to serve, to get engaged, and as my good friend, the late John Lewis would say, get in good trouble.
What would you say, if you could pick one, has been the toughest fight, and what are you most proud of?
I think that's a very difficult question because when you think of my time here in Congress, I would probably narrow it down to the same three things that I'm fighting for now: healthcare, the economy, and social justice. So that would be, I was so proud that I was able to stop my colleagues from repealing the Affordable Care Act. When you think about how many families and women and college students and seniors that helped save by providing them health care, I would probably say for a lifetime, we will always remember the 8 minutes and 46 seconds on George Floyd's neck. So I would probably say the George Floyd Justice in Policing Act. And then I would probably say being the chairwoman of the Diversity and Inclusion Committee on the Powerful Financial Services Committee, where I have fought and I'm still advocating to make sure that we have more women and more Black Americans and other minorities in the C-suites, on the boards, and getting equal pay for equal work.
Now, you were also just named to the Financial Institutions Committee for the U.S. House. Can you tell us more about that role and how you hope to champion Black families and Black businesses?
Well, when you think about our role and where we are today with the pandemic, I just voted on $75 billion that would go to housing to keep people from being evicted. Certainly, we know that helps Black Americans and other minorities. Voted that we have forbearances on mortgages, and also made sure that when we think about this pandemic and we think about the number of people who are dying, think about it. Black Americans make up 13% of the population, yet we're dying 15, 16% because of the coronavirus. So I made sure that we put dollars in there to educate our communities, to make sure that there are enough of the vaccines manufactured, distributed. We know our communities so often don't get the same thing that our counterparts or our majority communities get. We also know that we need more education and awareness in many areas because we have distrust, and rightly so. We remember the Tuskegee experiment in Henrietta Lacks. So that's why I am so proud of the Biden-Harris administration, because they are making sure that it is medicine, our physicians, and our scientists that are helping us. So I rolled up my sleeve and I got the vaccination because I want to lead by example. So I'm a fighter. I know what it's like because I was a small business owner for many years. So you can count on my voice on the Financial Services Committee, whether it's taking on those corporate banks who aren't disclosing if they are hiring people who look like me, to taking on Facebook's CEO when they wanted to be dismissive about diversity and inclusion. I want everyone to know I'm serious about it. I've written legislation, and I'm not afraid to take someone on who does not believe that we believe in not only diversity, not only inclusion, but equity.
Your passion is so palpable, and you mentioned the Biden administration. The country is going through a huge transition. Did you have any doubts about that transition? And if so, what was it that you were questioning?
I did not have specific doubts about the transition, but I was worried, I was concerned. And like most of America who was watching, maybe we should have been more concerned because of what happened on January the 6th with the insurrection. January the 6th is something that will be an indelible imprint in all of our minds who were there in the complex, the U.S. House floor, or in any of our offices barricaded, as well as those families and friends who watched from home as we went through the takeover of the United States Capitol, white supremacy.
Now, as I'm sure you could tell from those videos, Joyce is also a fashionista, always looking like the proud, professional, stylish soul that she is. That same appreciation for beauty, color, and impact is central to another Black women-owned business, Batiste Flowers. Owner Jean Batiste truly stands out for her creative, gorgeous creations poured into every arrangement or event. One quick note, the rest of our honorees are here in studio with Stephanie and me, and they welcome your questions. So please be sure to submit your questions. That's through the chat box, and we'll also take as many as time allows at the end of our program. Our third honoree represents a new generation of leadership, one who knows that change comes not just from the forcefulness of an individual, but from the power of collective will, and someone who knows that mutual action starts by creating mutual understanding.
I'm going to convene space, and together we're going to heal ourselves, each other, and we're going to figure it out.
She's the founder of the consulting firm called Chemistry.
One of my nicknames have been chemistry, and I'm like, this is like, I feel like I'm a chemist mixing things together to see what I can come up with in the lab.
And what Kim Braswell mixes up, well, she specializes in trauma-informed social justice. She's a diversity practitioner with a background in education and advocates for behavioral and mental health and wellness. And she tells me her services over the past year have been needed more than ever in helping people not only deal with the pandemic, but with racial injustice.
My ultimate goal would be to love to be put out of business. But right now the world is like in crisis. The world feels like it's on fire, right? And because of that, I've been busier than ever because I think people are realizing you can't just talk about systemic oppression. You can't talk about issues of disenfranchisement of people without talking about how they've been hurt.
Kim Braswell may be ahead of the crowd, but she's always stopping to put a hand out to those behind, next, and ahead of her. We're going to learn more from her right now with Kim joining us right here in the studio. Kim, you are truly an early advocate for conversations around diversity, equity, and inclusion. Of course, that's a hot topic right now, but it's discussions you've been having for a very long time. How would you say your experiences when you first started differ from the conversations you have in today?
You know, it's interesting. I think years ago when I was talking about this, I felt like Chicken Little. It's like, hey, the house is on fire, and everybody's like, it's fine. I'm like, no, it's not, right? And I think this was the difference, I know, for me in approaching it from a diversity, equity, inclusion perspective versus a social justice perspective. And I think that there are some cases and places and instances where it also called for us not to just look at the equity work, but also the disempowerment, disenfranchisement, how people have been harmed in the process, and make sure that we were addressing it from all different perspectives and from all different voices. Yeah.
When we see different traumatic events take place in our country that really cause this uproar and these conversations to come back to the forefront, is there any worry that you have that it isn't sustainable, that we aren't seeing action really take place, and how do we make sure that it does?
This is a huge concern of mine, and it comes up all the time in a lot of my conversations and a lot of the work that we're doing in community. One of the things that's concerning, particularly in Black communities and really BIPOC, Black, Indigenous, and people of color communities, is that we have so much systemic oppression, and it's been happening for so long that sometimes we're just trying to do the things like, let's do the coat drive, let's do the food drive, those kinds of things. But we don't forget, it's just that there's systemic oppression, right? So there's this big thing that takes much, much longer to fix, right? And so if we only address the immediate thing, sometimes it doesn't give us the longevity of the work that we need to do beyond that moment.
And your work specifically focuses on the trauma, the impact of these things. Can you talk about why it's really important to address one's trauma, even the response to these things continuously happen, and then ways to move forward?
Sure. So, you know, one of the things that I noticed in working inside of organizations and with people is that they have been harmed inside of systemic oppression. So we can put together policy and plans, but it doesn't always respond to the fact that I'm coming in with the trauma that I had, right? So it doesn't fix the scars, the epigenetic trauma, the trauma that's passed on in our DNA, right? And so that means in addition to the policy work, there's a healing component that has to be in place to make sure that people are healthy, healed, and whole for individual, community, and universal wellness.
And you also work specifically with Black women, a group that I think is very often overlooked. Can you share with us really about the importance of focusing on the issues happening within that community and how you try to really provide?
So I love this question, and part of it is because I notice no matter who I talk with, no matter what the age is, because I work a lot with youth, I think it's important to also fold in elders, community, everyone in between. And one of the patterns that I see in Black women is that we struggle with being enough and believing that we are enough. We're enough because we woke up. We're enough because we breathed air in our bodies, right? We are enough just because we showed up to do the work. But one of the things that happens is because I'm living in all of these different identity lenses, many of which are marginalized, we think that our productivity is what is the thing that speaks to our value, right? And so we're doing a lot, sometimes team too much, you know, and trying to make sure I did all of these things to make sure I was valuable in the space. And then we exhaust ourselves. And that is also how we kind of get to that trauma. And that's what makes us sick, and that's how we die. And so that's why I'm like, we gotta be well to do the work. We have to make sure our reservoirs are full.
That's something I can really relate to, trying to do so much. But you mentioned something about wanting to be enough in the future, in the near future even. Is it something you see happening, Black women being able to embrace their talents and their skills, but still balancing that needed level of rest?
I think it has to be, like, for survival. And there's this other thing too, right? We talk about surviving and survivor stories, success stories, but the thing that comes after surviving is thriving, right? And that's part of being our whole selves, being able to utilize all of my talents, operating inside of my passion, inside of what I believe I was called to do, purpose-driven work, purpose-driven life. That's gonna be our best work. That is social justice, right? That's how we walk it out. And I believe that that kind of authenticity is contagious. There's power in that, and I think that's the greatest source of power building for community.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Kim. And really what you're describing is a journey. It's not a quick fix. Yeah. It is a lifelong journey of working within ourselves and our environment. So Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Now, as Kim's life and work demonstrates, each of us has a call to be unique. Though we can like everyone, we can't be like everyone. We need to be our authentic selves. Originality also animates Exquisite Lifestyles. That's a boutique retailer of wines, gourmet coffee, tea, and cigars. Black woman owner Sonia Trent Pullum is a connoisseur extraordinaire who'll make any event or gift basket truly one of a kind. Now, our next honoree also is a standout herself. Her accomplishments have opened doors and opened minds, not only at one of our region's largest employers, but in the larger community as well.
Today, I am particularly proud and optimistic that change will occur.
Gail King says she's been lucky enough to work for a company that gets it. She started at Nationwide 37 years ago.
At that point in time, the reality is that there were not many minorities or women in positions of power. But I believe that I joined a company that cared about people and would be on a journey to make the movement and the improvements it needed.
King now has a career in the C-suite as the Executive Vice President and Chief Administrative Officer for Nationwide. According to Coquel, a workplace think tank in New York, African Americans occupy only 3.2% of leadership roles in large companies. Gail expects that to change.
I do believe that, post George Floyd, a new generation will expect more from corporations.
She says they'll demand it, and her advice to anyone seeking to better themselves in the corporate makeup: be relentless.
And when I talk about being relentless, that is doing the work, understanding what is required to be successful in a job, understanding what you need to do in order to be successful in a role. And then to just go and make it happen.
Gail leads a number of critical functions for Nationwide as Executive Vice President and Chief Administrative Officer. She's embedded diversity, equity, inclusion principles into the company's culture while also serving in a number of different board roles for both the Columbus and National Urban Leagues. She has much to teach and inspire us. So with us here today, and we're going to learn more. Gail, you've made it to the C-suite as one of America's most successful companies. This might be hard to answer, but is there a secret to success?
Well, first of all, I want to say thank you to Stephanie Hightower and the entire board of the Columbus Urban League for this recognition. And I also want to congratulate my fellow honorees. I'm certainly sitting with some amazing women. And I'm honored to be with all of you today. But is there a secret to success, Sierra? I believe that any of us can achieve anything we want in life. I think that there are things that we have to do. And for me, I have been very clear on my purpose, the why. And I have to share this, I never talk about my success without giving honor to my grandmother, who taught me and gave me an incredible sense of self. So, you know, my why, my North Star is to make her proud, and every day I try to do that. But I also I believe that I deserve it as much as anyone else. I believe that if I do the work, that I should be able to achieve whatever dream that I want. I understand the importance of relationships. I've been fortunate to have many people who've supported me. One of our honorees was mentioned earlier, Donna James, who was a senior executive at Nationwide and was a major supporter of me. Joyce, Beatty, and you know, everything she does for so many women. So relationships are important. Having the will, tenacity, and working a plan and just continuing to stay at it until you make it happen.
Climbing the ranks to the position that you are in, like you were saying, takes a lot of hard work. And maybe this is something we're grow tired of hearing, that being the only Black person or only Black woman in the room. How do you still manage that and respond to that?
You know, I'm very fortunate to work for a company that gets it, and I mentioned that earlier. I joined Nationwide because I felt that it was a company that valued people, and they've honored that. So while I have experience being in the room where I'm the only one, I've not allowed it to keep me from engaging and doing what I need to do to show my value. And I would encourage anyone who feels that they're the only one in the room, is you come prepared and you come saying, I belong here. Because at the end of the day, the only thing that matters is what you tell the world and the people around you. So come prepared and demand to be heard.
And on that note, we've been talking about how it really takes a village to get to where we want to be. What would you say, or who would you say really motivates you to stay in your career?
To stay in my career? Wow, I told you I am motivated and forever motivated by my desire to make my grandmother proud. But my purpose, I talk about having a purpose. The work that I do motivates me. I think that every day I'm able to positively impact the lives of the associates at Nationwide. My success enables me to positively impact the lives of my family and others. So other people motivate me. And again, my North Star is to make my grandmother proud, and every day I try to do that.
Now, in addition to your work with Nationwide, you are also dedicated to serving the community with National and the Columbus Urban Leagues. Can you talk about your volunteerism, why that's important to you as well?
Well, again, I have benefited from organizations that walked alongside me when I needed it. I've seen many people who have benefited from organizations that walked alongside of them. I believe that if you have been blessed and you have been successful, that it is your accountability and indeed responsibility to give back. And so I take great pride in being involved with the work of the Columbus Urban League, the National Urban League, and so many other organizations, because I think I should.
Now, many women, especially I think as Black women, struggle with the demand of a job and a personal life, family, all factors. And as Kim was saying, sometimes we struggle to take that rest that we really need. Do you have any kind of tips or strategies that you utilize to
I'm not
succeed?
the right one on that one. I'm sorry, Sierra. I wish I could help. You know, again, I think that we need to be kind to ourselves. I don't believe that Nationwide required me to work as many hours as I did. I think a lot of that is self-imposed. I think that we have to do the reflection and realize that in order to be healthy, that you have to give to your work, but you do have to make time for yourself. I didn't do it as well as I should have, but I can certainly give that advice.
It's called having grace with ourselves, right?
Absolutely, absolutely.
Now, we've talked about how there are discussions around diversity, equity, inclusion. Do you see big changes coming for corporate America? And if you do, what would that really look like, those tangible changes?
Wow. I mean, again, I mentioned this earlier. I believe that young people will demand that organizations live into who they say they are. And that, you know, at the end of the day, organizations need talent. And I believe that this generation is going to say, if you are not willing to support me and create an environment where I feel welcome and included, that they will take their talent someplace else. So again, I think that it's a talent game. I believe that organizations understand they need talent, and organizations always respond to what is good for their business. And valuing people and creating an environment where everyone can succeed is good for business.
Absolutely. Any parting words, advice you have for the rest of the women that are here that we're celebrating and for the people watching?
Well, I want to say to all of these women how proud I am of all of you. Whenever I see you, I feel motivated to do even more. But to all of the ladies and watching, what I would encourage you to do is to get in the way, to understand and to dream big. And then to put a plan in place and work that plan. One of the things that I've observed with people sometimes is that they think that getting to the C-suite will happen tomorrow. It doesn't. But if you have a plan and you work that plan year after year, you will look up and whatever your dreams are, you would have realized them. So go get in the way, dream big, and go make a difference in the lives of the organizations you work for and your family and friends.
Thank you so much, Gail.
Sarah.
So again, a reminder that you can send in questions for Gail or for all of our guests through the chat box, and we will do our best to answer each of those questions before we conclude today. Our final business reminds that for many, our roots, our history traced back to Africa and the rich, intricate history of the origins of Homo sapiens. Our final business, the African Accent Llc, is owned by Sierra Lineant, born creative Kalai Kamara, who draws up her rich heritage to design wearable art. DNA and biological history are traits to be celebrated and better understood. Our final honoree has dedicated her life to promoting a greater awareness of biology and health, and in particular has been a strong advocate for ending health inequities in the Black community, while also guiding us through the most difficult pandemic of our times.
We've been using messages about safe hand washing and appropriate hand washing.
She's the City of Columbus's top doctor, and over the past year during the pandemic, she's had the challenge of keeping Columbus safe.
This past year has been unbelievable. I feel honored and privileged to be in this position and to be able to lead our community through this pandemic. But the amount of work, the stress, and the decisions that I have to make, that my team has to make, that our mayor has to make, has been very stressful. China, Italy, Japan, Iran, and South Korea will be excluded from participating in the event.
Dr. Mashika Roberts tells me she remembers when she asked the mayor to cancel the Arnold.
I have to admit, I was surprised with the response I got, which they were like, okay, let's talk more about this.
Appointed to the position of health commissioner in December of 2017, Roberts says personally her biggest achievement was finishing med school and encourages all women of color to work hard to reach their goals.
Just being the minority is hard, and you have to be strong, but you have to be prepared. And that's what I think everyone has to understand. You have to be prepared, and you have to be more prepared than your peers.
As Columbus's health commissioner since 2017, Dr. Mashiga Roberts has been a warrior in the work to understand and overcome social determinants of health and keep us safe in the strange new world of COVID-19. I can't wait to hear her thoughtful candor as we speak today. Dr. Roberts, thank you so much for being here today. And what a time to be talking after a year that we've had and are still living in this pandemic. But can you start by telling us what it was like studying as a Black woman to study medicine and to be a part of that field?
Sure. Well, thanks for having me, and I commend the Urban League for this event today, and I'm really proud to be among my fellow honorees today, so thank you. You know, I grew up in a healthcare household. I had a dad who was a physician and a mom who was a nurse, and so I also had the luxury of growing up around other Black physicians, and all of my physicians growing up were of color. So in med school, I knew it was possible. I knew that as a minority, I could achieve my dream, but it was still hard. And as I shared in the piece, I always knew I had to be more prepared than the next person. You know, my mom and my sister always taught me you've got to dress for the job that you want, not for the job that you have. So I remember in med school, I looked very young, and I was always accused. I mean, one time I got stopped by a cop because I was at the bank during the daytime, and when I was in med school, they thought I was truant, and they said, "Aren't you supposed to be in school?" And I said, "Well, class is out for the day. What are you talking about?" So I always, dressed the part, but I also thought as a African-American woman, I had to show up in a very professional way so that individuals would take me seriously. So throughout medical school, I knew it was not just the knowledge that I had to gain, but it was my presentation as well. And being a woman of color, I knew that meant even more.
Who were those mentors that you really relied on to learn that, and what did they teach you as you went along?
Well, I was fortunate to have several mentors. I mean, my parents were two of my mentors, but I had some really positive role models. I remember I had a dermatologist when I was in high school who was a Black female, and I would come home and see her, and she would give me some guidance as a Black female physician and what you had to do. But I leaned on my peers, the individuals who were a few years older than me in med school or in residency, to guide me as well. So I picked and found mentors along the way who could assist me.
It sounds like you had a lot of support from a young age, but what would you say really drew you in to becoming a public health administrator?
Well, I tell the story all the time. I was in college when Magic Johnson announced that he was HIV positive. And so that drew me to public health, and then trying to determine how I was going to use my medical degree and my public health degree to really do good for the community. And so I had an opportunity to work in a community health center while I was in grad school, and I saw public health administrators in action. And so it was, my upbringing, it was the Magic Johnson, and was that summer experience. All those together really inspired me to do this kind of work.
And as I'm sure you could have never imagined that in your work you would be dealing with a pandemic. None of us could have imagined something like this. But in your role as health commissioner, how have you really maintained your focus with COVID-19 still rampant?
Well, it's been a challenge, and I started with a staff of about 450 individuals before the pandemic, and now we've expanded to a team of almost 600 individuals just to try to respond to the pandemic. But even though the pandemic has been our focus, we haven't lost sight of infant mortality. We haven't lost sight of woman care and overdoses. Those issues are still right there, and we still have a team of staff that are working on it. Now, I will admit we've been distracted somewhat by this pandemic, and the pandemic has highlighted some of those issues that we were working on before. So it's been a challenge, but I've got a great team, and that helps me. I always tell leaders, you've got to surround yourself by good people, and I feel really good about the work and the team that I have assembled. But it's been a challenge, and I can't lose sight of it, and I'm really looking forward to getting to the other side of this pandemic so we can really focus on some of those same issues we were dealing with before the pandemic, and realizing there are likely going to be some new issues that have been created as a result of this pandemic.
During this pandemic, you mentioned that it really has highlighted health inequities that really existed before this started, but are just bringing people more awareness to them. Are there certain health inequities that keep you up at night, really bother you, and you feel need more attention paid to?
Well, it's really all of them that keep me up at night. But I will say, right now, one of the things that I'm most concerned about is this vaccine rollout and how we're going to reach people of color. And I am concerned, I've expressed my concern to others, that the current vaccine rollout is disproportionately impacting people of color. We know right here in Franklin County that 92% of African Americans are under the age of 65, and 96% of Latinos are under the age of 65. Yet age has been a criteria for who's getting vaccinated, and our Black and brown communities are missing out because of shorter life expectancy. So that's one that's on my radar right now, and I'm honed in on it, and I'm telling anyone I can to get some special grace for our community so we can get vaccinated.
Now, we all watched as Dr. Amy Acton did become a target of some sort for many who had disagreed with her in the beginning months of this pandemic when she was trying to protect people's health. What did you think about the way that she was treated, and how have you coped with those kind of concerns and response you could get in your role?
Well, I commend Amy Acton. I mean, she's a great leader, and I'm sad that she's no longer leading us through this pandemic. I think the ways that she was treated was completely unacceptable. And it did bring a lot of negative attention to how people just didn't want someone telling them what they couldn't do. I mean, that was really the bottom line. I think for me, it definitely made me think about my safety and security. It made my husband and I think about our home and what we needed to do, or things that I needed to do to protect myself. I mean, it was a little unnerving when the police chief would call me and say, "Dr. Roberts, are you okay? Is there anything we can do for you?" Fortunately, I have not experienced any of those threats. I have gotten some threatening emails from some parents wanting their kids back in school, but I haven't seen anything to the likes of what Dr. Acton experienced. But I know my peers across the country have. I have one peer in the California area who has a sheriff officer with her at all times, even when she walks her dog, because of threats. So this pandemic has really put a lot of pressure on health officers like myself that we didn't necessarily sign up for. But I think we're standing up to the challenge as best we can, because we know what we're doing is the right thing to do for our community.
Absolutely, and it's really just another reason why we commend you for your work that you do for our community, because we understand it cannot be easy. Now, going back to other health inequities or even just challenges that this pandemic has really come to light. Columbus dealing with a more quiet issue of an opioid epidemic. We're seeing more deaths, specifically here in Franklin County, over the past year now. What are your thoughts on that and combating that issue and helping people who do struggle with addiction?
Well, we all have to remember opiate misuse and opioid overdoses were here before the pandemic. And like many things, this pandemic has just highlighted some of the issues our community has. And it's also escalated mental health issues. So I think moving forward, we have to normalize mental health issues. We need to be able to talk about mental health. And we need to be able to get more treatment for mental health, for drug addiction, and other things. And so that's definitely going to be something that we're focused on now, but we're really going to be focused on the other side of this pandemic. Treatments are still available. Treatment facilities are still open. More and more people are turning towards counselors for assistance. This social isolation has been very challenging, even for the strongest of us. And so we all have to just recognize that and seek care and help when we know we need it.
Thank you so much for that. We really appreciate everyone's candor and your thoughts today. Thank you, Dr. Roberts. So now in just a minute, we will be pulling some questions from that chat box that I mentioned. Steffi and I will pose them to our appropriate guests for each of those questions. And it looks like we'll get into it right now, but we'll be right back after this message that you might have recently seen on TV.
Poverty, racism, and COVID-19. We're confronting complex, heart-wrenching challenges. As an economic first responder, we work relentlessly for recovery, reform, and resiliency. Contact us if you or someone you love needs help. Right now, stay safe and take care of your family. Let's never again allow closed doors to close minds. Tomorrow is up to us.
Okay, so we have some questions from the people viewing right now. We appreciate you putting those in the chat box. Remember, you can keep submitting your questions for our honorees today. We have a question. First, we're going to start by, for all of our panelists, really, anyone, please feel free to jump in and answer this. Someone would like to know how each of you would advise others if they're working with someone who doesn't appear to embrace diversity, equity, and inclusion. How do you handle that?
I'll jump in, since they're looking at me.
Sure.
My colleagues are like, okay,
It's all
Gail,
you, Gail.
it's on you. So I think that you have to, it's a broad question, but I do think it depends on the situation, and it depends on who it is that's not embracing diversity, equity, and inclusion. First of all, we have to accept that, and I tell people all the time, I can't make you change who you are. All I care about is how you show up at the office. And what I would say, if it's a colleague, if you're on a team and you feel that your colleague is not showing up in the right way, the question that you should then do is talk with your leader, the manager, and say, hey, let me share with you how I'm experiencing this person and how it's making me feel. And that's the accountability of the leader, to have conversations. If it's someone you might want to say, hey, you said this, and let me tell you how it felt. But again, approach it from, I don't think you mean this, or this is how it's showing up. If it's an organization and you think it's a senior leader in an organization, that's one where you avail yourself of the system. I encourage people to talk with human resources and say, this particular leader is behaving this way, and this way is contrary to who I believe the company is. And again, so I would say call it out, but call it out from a place of positive intent, and I'm sure change will occur when you handle it that way.
Something I've heard before is it's not a call out, it's a call in. Yeah. Call in to hold them accountable to their words, their actions, whatever it may be, and almost reframe it so they can understand why their actions or words are harmful.
Yeah. But the other thing too is also to understand that there will be people who will not be supportive of you. And some things it's not necessarily a diversity, equity, and inclusion. It could just be a personality. And you have to not give people that kind of power. If they're not doing anything to impact my ability to get my job done, I don't waste any energy on how they show up. But if they do, then I deal with that.
Can I add something?
Absolutely.
A couple different things. One of the things is, I think it is important for folks to realize that how you show up in a space is contagious, right? And so you think that this might be something that you're experiencing, but if I bring negative energy into the space, it actually is a detriment to everything we're trying to do, right? It negatively impacts the bottom line of everything that we're trying to accomplish as an organization, the mission, vision, values, the objectives. We can't actually do our work if I don't care about you, right? And so I have to, we talk about this a lot on some of the calls that we're on, but I need to understand that I'm actually connected to you. I'm not separate from you. So if I don't care about you, it actually negatively impacts the work. Do I care about that, number one? Do I care about you? Do I care about the work? If so, is this something that I want to fix? And if so, what does that require of me? And then this is where the trauma-informed social justice for me links in, because I don't think people realize that we're whole people, right? I would like to say I'm a professional, I'm just sitting with these phenomenal women right now. I am also Charlie and London's mom, right? I'm also Tony and Patricia's daughter. I'm a whole person. And that means we have whole stories that are connected to our being. So all of the stuff that is the composite total of who I am walked into the professional workplace as well. Right, so if I had implicit bias about any kind of thing, I brought that into the workplace with me, and it's tied to my story. Do I want to fix that or not? It's a conscious decision, and then it's a choice, especially if that is negatively impacting someone being able to be great at work, someone being able to be great at what we say our purpose is, right? So there's that part. Separate from that, though, separate from that greater good is, ultimately, you can't change people's minds if they don't want it to be changed, or their hearts, right? So some work is policy, and some work is just do you care or not? Right. And if you don't care, my job isn't I can't make you care. I can't make you love me. Can't make you care about me. So if you don't, you don't. Then the focus is, what do I do for me? What do I do for my people? to make sure that let me just focus on the good. What is my locus of control? In a lot of mental health spaces, you were talking about mental health, and it's a lot of the advocacy work that I did. We talk about internal locus of control and external locus of control. I can control me. I can control how I respond to the situation. And I'm not gonna let this stuff that is outside of my control diminish my capacity to be great and to do what I am called to do and how I am called to serve.
Perfect. Yes, what I'm hearing is for us to be mindful of our energy, the energy that we engage with and then put out to other people. Absolutely. I want to move on to another question we have from one of our viewers, and I think this is really timely, seeing that you all are being honored for being a prominent Black female figure in your respective fields. This person wants to know, how does one avoid or embrace labels such as the Black doctor, florist, the Black executive, or the Black-owned company? I think all of us can relate to being the token or the only one in a room at some time. So how do you kind of deal with those conflicting feelings?
Well, first I would say I'm proud of it. I'm very proud that I'm the first African American health commissioner for the city of Columbus. And, I am in a lot of rooms where I'm the only Black physician or the only Black health commissioner, and you have to embrace it, and you also have to realize the responsibility that comes with that. What I don't like, and I don't know if this question is getting there, but I don't like it when people say, well, you speak so well. Well, if I were a white physician, would you say that? Of course I speak well, I'm educated, so that I don't like. But when I'm the only Black, I embrace it, and I know that it comes with a lot of responsibility, and I want to do my best to live up to that responsibility.
Yeah. I can just say yes, yes, yes to that. I mean, I am a proud Black woman, and I understand the role that I play in representing for people who are looking up to me like I looked up to others. So yes, I embrace my Blackness, but like her, the word articulate, that creates issues for us, so again, but we're proud of our Blackness.
Yes. And I think it gets to also cultural code switching, right? And I know for me, I've made a conscious decision to do as little code switching as possible. Like, this is me, this is how I'm showing up into the space, and I have to be authentic in what I'm doing. So either the room will adjust to it or not. However, I think the other thing it touches on is this thing, doing this work when people say things like, I don't see color, right?
Colorblind.
Right, and it's like, don't do that. That's colorblind racism. I need you to see, and so I intentionally wear this because I want you to see this. I want you to see my heritage. I'm proud of this, and I've brought my Blackness into the space, not a spectacle though, right? It's not supposed to be spectacle. Curiosity is fine, but spectacle, no. So honor who I am, just like I'm honoring who you are in your wholeness and in your fullness. But when you start compartmentalizing identity, you are trying to shrink who I actually am in the space. I'm a whole person.
Being intentionally authentic. I like that. So we have another question that's specifically for you, Dr. Roberts. This viewer says, there's been research that shows all life expectancy gains. Excuse me, I'm going to say that again. There's been research that shows all the life expectancy gains that Black communities has been lost due to the pandemic. What do we do to ensure our community as a whole doesn't lose focus on the issues of systemic racism?
Well, great question. And there has been some new research that showed as a result of the pandemic, life expectancy as a whole for our country has decreased by about 1 year. But when you look at brown and Black individuals, it's increased even more. So for Black individuals, we've lost about 3 years of life expectancy, and Latinos specifically have lost almost 2 years of life expectancy. We all know systemic racism exists. But this pandemic has just really highlighted that more than ever. So we can't lose sight of that, and I think as a community, it's clear our mayor has made racism a public health issue. We need to work collectively. We need to do more work with the Columbus Urban League and other agencies in town, because we have to recognize racism exists, and then we have to figure out what we're going to do to address it. And this isn't just something that happened during the pandemic, like we've said. It didn't happen a few years before. This has been decades and hundreds of years in the making, and hundreds of years that we have to undo.
And a follow-up question for me is, what are the efforts that you've been seeing really work for Columbus individually in making sure that Black communities are getting the vaccine, getting the proper information about the vaccine? Because as we've seen, there's a lot of skepticism about it in that community.
Yeah, there is. And so we've been doing a lot, but I'm not going to lie, there's more that we can do. So I've been doing a lot of talks, a lot of webcams and Zoom calls. We opened an opportunity clinic at the health department for certain zip codes in Columbus where we know have a high degree of minorities living there, but also high unemployment, low access to health care, and we've been getting them into the clinic to get vaccinated. But I will tell you, something happened to me yesterday that really made all of the work I've been doing make sense. There was a woman who showed up at one of our vaccine clinics in town yesterday. She was a woman of color, and she told everyone there that she was only there because she heard myself and Dr. Fauci talk about the vaccine. But prior to that, she was never getting the vaccine. Wow. And so that just made, I mean, I almost went into tears when my staff told me, but that's why I do this work, you know, and my staff say, why do you keep doing these Zoom calls? You know, you're keeping us busy, but that's why I do it. If I can convince one person to get this vaccine, I feel like I've done my job.
And it matters. The work that you're doing matters.
Thank you. Thank you.
We have another question. Someone says, we have all heard the negatives. What are some of the positives that have come out of 2020 for any of you?
Can I share with this?
Absolutely.
Because I was just in a conversation about this. So one of the things that I think was wonderful about 2020, and it's controversial for people to be like, there were some good things, right? But on a personal level, I had a phenomenal 2020. There were absolute heavy things that happened. But one of the things that 2020 created an opportunity for is for people to actually sit down and do personal work on themselves, right? I have to sit still. I can't go everywhere that I'm supposed to do. So we were able to figure out what is the greater agency that I have over my talent, time, and treasure, right? Who are the human beings around me? How am I managing the relationships with other people? How am I managing the relationships with myself? It caused us to really be conscious about our habits. Am I sleeping? Am I eating well? Did I actually get my mental health counseling that I was supposed to so I don't disrupt my whole family and everybody around me? And I think it also created an opportunity for people to figure out how to be more creative in using their gifts, right? So like if we're used to going to the office and I think we lose a whole bunch of time when you're like, go to the office, you sit at the desk, you do the break room, you do all those kinds of things. When the time is yours, you have to figure out how to best utilize that time. And I think it created an opportunity for people to be more creative and more passionate and to understand the importance of self-care, which I think is a gift.
Absolutely. Any other positives to share?
Well, I would say one positive is, you know, people know about public health now. People did not know about public health before this pandemic, and applications not only for public health school, but for medical school have skyrocketed as a result of this pandemic, and hopefully even more of those are minorities. So I think that's been a positive.
I think the only thing I would add and probably affirm, I think that it certainly helped us connect with people. A lot of self-reflection, but also connecting with people, and you make time for it. The other thing that came out and that we've seen is the innovation. I mean, I've just been amazed at how innovative and how digital we are now. So, I mean, I think there have been some really neat things that have occurred, but for me, it was just connecting with family and friends that perhaps I would not have taken the time to do when I was running.
Good. Thank you for sharing those silver linings. Another question we have, what advice do you all have for being resilient in the workplace or overcoming mistakes, which we all make, especially when you feel pressure of being perfect and performing better than non-Black peers all the time? This is a good question.
I think it's a great question, so I'll add, and I'm sure that my colleagues up here will add to it. I think it's really important in the workplace that you have a network of people who you can go to and have conversations with, because we sometimes are our worst critic, and so it's critical to have, and I think about when I was first moved to Columbus, Ohio, and Donna James was there, and we're all trying our best to be great, but I remember, making some mistakes along the way and going in and having a conversation with her and having her help me sort of recast the situation and see it through a different filter. So I would encourage people, one, not to be too hard on themselves, but to also have a number of people that they can reach out to who will help them perhaps look at it a little bit differently.
Yeah. One of the things I do in community is I co-facilitate a support group for Black helpers, right? And this comes up all the time. And there are 3 words that we're focusing on that relate to that, and it is acceptance, grace, and forgiveness for ourselves and for other people. I can't get it all right, but I'm not also supposed to carry the whole world, right? And I think, and we talked about this earlier, if I think I'm supposed to do all things and be all things, there's much more room for failure. But I'm not putting that responsibility on other people to do, so why do I believe I have to carry that? Yeah. Like, who told me that, and why did I believe it, right? And so then I can go back and I can recreate that narrative that that's not all of my work to do. This is the composite total of my gifts. I can utilize my gifts, and I'm not supposed to do anything else because, like, I'm not supposed to do what Dr. Roberts does. I'm not supposed to do what Gayle King does. I'm supposed to do what I do. And then they can be great in what they do. I can celebrate them for being dope because they are, and I can do what I do, and I stay in my lane, and I can excel in my lane without the responsibility of thinking I'm supposed to get out of my focus. Just focus. Focus on your own greatness. You're great all by yourself. And again, knowing that your worth isn't because you produce 8 million things. You were worthy when you woke up. You were worthy when you took air into your lungs. You were worthy and valuable because you are walking on this planet. And anything else is a bonus.
Ooh, Kim's gonna take us to church today. You're gonna make me cry. This next question I think is actually great for you to answer as well, Kim. Do you have any advice for young people who are interested in working in diversity, equity, and inclusion, that field?
Yes. So I had a mentor. I have a lot of mentors, but I remember I had a mentor specifically who asked me a question that made me stop in my tracks. And I wish I would have gotten this question when I first started working. And what he asked me is, how do you show up in the world? Which is a pretty big question, right? Mm-hmm. How do you show up in the world? And I'm like, what do you mean? He said, when you are in a room, how does the room change when you're in it? That called me to be really reflective about, like, what is the gift that I have that speaks to the differences in the space, that speaks to what people need in the space, and how we can sustainably make people feel welcomed and included. I can welcome you one time and never welcome you again, right? But it's the sustainable practice of it to figure out, how do I can create an environment? What do I have to contribute in that? I think that's what young people need to know is, you have a specific gift, and that specific gift is needed in fellowship with other people's gifts to make spaces safer and braver and more courageous. And I think that's what leads to great diversity, equity, and inclusion work.
Thank you. So our final question is for all of you, and it's going to be a one-word answer. What is your one word, technically 2 words, what is your one word to describe 2020 and your word to describe 2021? Let's start with Dr. Roberts.
So I have 2 words for 2020.
Okay.
So
I'll give it to you.
One is, the first word is change. I mean, 2020 was all about change. It was constant change, at least for me and in my industry. And my other word would be strength. You know, I think as a nation, we all showed the strength we had to get through 2020. And then for 2021, I think my word is going to be rainbow. Because I really see some new beginnings. We have a new administration. We've got our first female Black vice president. And I think we're going to see a lot of new things coming out. And we already talked about some of the entrepreneurs and things that got started in 2020. But I just think the rainbow gives us all a sense of hope that we have for 2021.
Yeah.
And for me, I thought 2020 was one about resiliency. I mean, I think about everything that we could possibly we faced into in 2020. And I thought that as individuals and collectively, we showed up and we showed our resiliency. For me, as I think about 2021, I'm sort of like her. I'm not using the word rainbow. I think it's a great word, though. It's really, I am optimistic about 2021 and all that we can do together from our learnings from 2020. So that we're stronger than we thought and optimistic about the future.
I love this question because I feel like I prepared for this.
This is the one.
Yes, because I pick a word every year. Mm-hmm. So, but the word I would use for 2020 would be epiphany. And I think it was an epiphany, like, oh my God, all of these things are present here, and we've been paying attention to them, right? And then to be brief, my word for 2021 that I picked was supernova. A supernova is an explosion of stars, right? In that moment, they become brighter than the sun, creates a black hole that something turns into a parallel universe. We have an opportunity to create something that has never been created before. And what we do with it, we'll find out.
We will. I want to thank all of you for this candid conversation today. We honor you, we celebrate you and all that you do for the community, and we just appreciate all of your work and being with us here today. Stephanie has some final words for us, so I'm going to send it on over to Stephanie Hightower.
Thank you. So as we close, I want to first thank our honorees today. Just phenomenal, as I said earlier. And I know that Congresswoman Beatty is in D.C. after that big vote, so I appreciate her being on today as well. Our sponsors, J.P. Morgan Chase, Brainstorm Media, WSYX-TV, and Sierra Lucas for making today's event possible. I've known the women we've spotlighted today for a long time, and yet I still found myself surprised and inspired by their stories. I also want to celebrate and recognize my women board members who are amazing leaders, and they keep me grounded. Nicole Barnes-Marshall, Kiana Williams, Vanita Clements, Stephanie Green, and Takesha Shepard. Too many of our heroes and sheroes were lost to history. Why is it that every high school student knows about Thomas Edison, but few know that a black man named Lewis Latimer created the carbon filament that made light bulbs actually last? Bobby Brown is practically a household name when it comes to cosmetics, but how many know about Madam C.J. Walker and her line of hair products that made her one of our first African-American self-made millionaires? Today is yet another way we can begin to record and remember the achievements of courageous black women so that our daughters and our granddaughters can remember them too. And finally, it is a way for us to celebrate one another and remind each of you, you are special, and the world needs what you have to offer. Thank you for supporting your Columbus Urban League, and thank you for your commitment to not just leaving a legacy, but living one.